Hey guys, it's Chris at Highline Guitars, and you're watching from the Luthiers Workbench. In this episode, I'm going to give you a quick update on the Apollyon Green Dragon guitar that I've been working on. I'm also going to give you an update on the CNC project that I've decided to dive headfirst into. And then I'll finish up by explaining the reasons why I don't record audio samples of the guitars that I build. As you can see, the Green Dragon guitar is getting close to being finished. I am in the process of installing all the hardware, and as you can see, I have chosen gold finished hardware for this guitar. And part of the reason is because as you know from a previous video I did, I installed Cintam's bell bronze fret wire, and initially I thought, well, to complement the slight gold tone of the fret wire, I'll use gold hardware. But the problem is, in truth, to the untrained eye, this fret wire looks like stainless steel or nickel silver. You really can't tell that it's bronze. You can't really see any kind of that yellowy goldish bronze color in the wire. So but anyways, I like the way the gold looks on this particular guitar. And in truth, the selection of gold hardware kind of brings up an interesting topic, and I plan to address this in next week's Quick Tips number 4. And what I'm going to talk about is some strategies that you can put into play to help purchase the components so that whatever finish you've decided, whether it's chrome or black or gold or nickel or whatever, will all match. Because as you know, all these components are coming from different manufacturers. They're often made from different materials, and the end result is they can have different shades of gold. So I'm going to try to explain some strategies that I use that you can consider when making those type of purchases. So that's kind of where things are with this guitar. Oh yeah, I've also wound up the humbucker pickups for this guitar, and I wound these bobbins with 43 gauge wire, which is my favorite wire to use when winding pickups. It gives you all that broad range of tone from treble through mid-range down to bass, but it also allows you to wind it with enough power to really drive an amp into distortion. And that's hard to get when you're using like a 42 gauge wire, which is typically used for a more of a vintage style PAF type humbucker. Other guys like to use 44 when they're winding to a really high output. The problem is when you start really winding high output, you start to lose some of that treble, so then you have to switch to a different kind of magnet, like a ceramic magnet or an Alnico 8. And I really like to use Alnico 5s with the 43 gauge wire. I think I get the broadest range of tone, and it affords me the more options in terms of how much power the pickup is going to put out. So all I have to do now is assemble those pickups, pot them, and then I'm going to throw some gold covers on it and get those mounted. And at that point I can finish up the electronics and string this guitar up and do the setup, and that should be done. And hopefully this guitar will be finished by early next week. And once it's done, I'll take a ton of photos and post them up on Facebook, and so you can see on my Highline Guitars page, so you can see how it turned out. In last week's episode, I talked about how I built this workbench, which is going to serve as a table to support my CNC machine. And there were a couple of comments that came in about how I did the center support. I call it a stringer. It's just a 2x4 that runs across the center. And in truth, it's not really there to add any rigidity to the table at all. All it's there for is to support the center of this tabletop. This tabletop is actually 2 pieces. And I like to do those in 2 pieces. That way, if any part of the table ever gets damaged, I can just replace half of it rather than the whole thing. And that just works out better for me. But I installed that support board flat like this. instead of like this. Everyone said, oh, you should do it like this, it's going to be stronger. The board that I use, it's a 2x4, but it is quarter sawn, and it's very, very straight and dry, and I don't think it's going to ever have any issues with warping or twisting or bending or anything like that. But this table is designed, or its intention is to support the weight of the CNC machine, not add anything to the structural rigidity of the machine. The machine itself has been engineered to be as rigid as it can possibly be. In fact, I'm going to be using, this is the T-slot extruded aluminum I'm using. And most of your standard T-slot aluminum is quite a bit less beefy than this stuff. This stuff is thicker, and it's much stronger, heavier duty stuff. So it does not twist, it doesn't bend. I'm thoroughly confident that it's going to build out a structure that has all the rigidity that is necessary for this machine. And when I put the machine on this table, it's only going to be sitting in contact with the table at the four corners, and it's going to be resting on adjustable feet. So what is most important is that the corners of this table be as strong as possible to support the weight of the machine. And I'm absolutely confident that it will be. Now, if for some reason that center support were to give me trouble, if it were to warp or twist or bend or whatever, it's really simply a matter of removing the 3 screws from either end, or from both ends, tipping it from flat to vertical, and then installing 3 new screws, and I'd be good to go. But I'm absolutely confident that's never going to be an issue with this. So where things stand with the CNC itself is all the parts, as you can see, are starting to come in. I've got my supported linear rails for the X-axis, and they're mounted to those to the extruded aluminum supports. And I've got a whole bunch of bearings that have come in. I've got my couplers, anti-backlash nuts. I've got one of my 3 lead screws. The other 2 should be here tomorrow or Monday. And I just ordered the linear rail supports for the Y-axis, and they're coming in from California, so they should be here next week as well. And then once I have those, what I can do is I can actually start to build the X-axis gantry and the Z-axis, and then from that I can measure out and determine the final dimensions for the extruded aluminum I'm going to need for the table itself. And I'm kind of building this out in stages. I've found that even though the manufacturers will post all their specifications for their components, it's sort of like when you build a guitar. If you rely totally on a manufacturer's specification, there's a good chance that when you actually get that part, it may not quite match up with those specifications. And in the case of the CNC machine, everything has to match up perfectly. So I created a full-scale 3D drawing of this machine on my computer, and that helps me to make sure that all the components are going to work well together. But as I get those parts in, I can fine-tune the dimensions to make sure that everything is going to be cut and drilled precisely, so that when the machine is assembled, there won't be any problems with gaps or pieces coming up short. Everything should line up pretty well. And at that stage, once the machine is built, then I can weigh the gantry and the Z-axis together with the router to get an idea of what the weight is, so that I can make a sound decision on what kind of stepper motors, stepper motor drivers, and all the electronics that I'm going to use to run the machine. And one of the things I noticed in looking at how other folks have built their machines is there are a lot of guys out there that like to brag about how they over-engineered their CNC machine. And whenever I hear someone brag about how they over-engineered something, I can't help but think it's like wearing a sign that says, "Hi, I don't know what I'm doing." when you over-engineer something, you're going to be spending way more money than you need to. But if you engineer right to, maybe to a worst-case scenario for what you're going to actually use the machine for, you can save a lot of money and build a machine that's going to do exactly what it needs to do. And for that reason, I think that this build is going to end up costing quite a bit less than what some of the other machines out there are costing. Now, once I have this machine done, I plan to use it for probably about 6-7 months, and then once I'm confident that everything is working properly, I'm going to post an overriding video which will explain the features and how I designed it and how I built the machine. And then from that, I'm going to offer a set of plans so that anyone who's interested can build a similar machine themselves. So that's kind of where the whole CNC thing stands right now, and hopefully in the next 2 months I'll have this machine finished and carving guitars. But I'll keep you updated as each week progresses with this build, because it's a lot of fun. I'm excited about it, and I'm having a lot of fun building this thing. So every so often I'll get a customer or a viewer who will ask for audio samples of the guitars that I build, and I used to do that, but I stopped doing it a couple of years ago. And there's a couple of reasons why I chose to stop recording those audio samples. First of all, I don't know if you'll remember, but back in 2015, I posted a video on YouTube where I showed the construction of a guitar I called the Home Depot caster. And it's mostly just a slideshow showing the different stages of construction and assembly. But at the end of that video, I sat in my living room and strummed out a few chords on the guitar so you could kind of get an idea of what it sounds like. When I did that video, it was my hope that without actually saying what my objective was, people would understand and would get it. And I think based on the comments that that video got, most people do seem to get it and understand it. But there have been a number of comments that make it obvious to me that there are still a lot of people out there who just don't get the obvious. So what that video really taught me after I made it was you really are taking a chance when you record an audio sample of a guitar, post it online in hopes that it will encourage people to want to buy your product, because tone is subjective, and what some people like, other people are going to hate. With that video, however, it seemed pretty universal that most people disliked the tone of it. But what people didn't understand was the point that I was trying to make with that video. At that time, there was another video making the rounds, and you probably will remember this, where a guy had actually built a guitar out of a cinder block. And his point was pretty obvious. He wanted to demonstrate that you could build a high-quality instrument out of something like a cinder block, something that would be equal in performance to a higher-end guitar like a 59 Les Paul or a vintage Telecaster or Stratocaster. And that, sparked a lot of debate. Well, when I made my video, I decided not to be so obvious in explaining what I was doing, but I think it's really important to understand the guitar was made out of wood sourced from Home Depot. It was a Douglas fir body, it was a plywood top, and Home Depot maple neck. My intent was not to build a guitar and try to convince you that it would be as good as a Les Paul, vintage Les Paul or whatever. I was really just trying to put it out there so that you could make your own determination as to whether or not it was a good or bad guitar. But it seemed like so many people were put off by the tone. And it's really funny when you watch that video, just before I start to play, I'm sitting in my living room and I kind of talk about the guitar a little bit. And if you listen to that audio of my voice, it's pretty obvious the quality of the recording is hideous. I mean, it's as bad as you could possibly get it. What I was using to make that video was one of these little mini flip video cameras. These were really popular a number of years ago. They're just a basic, HD video camera. They were around for a while. Like I said, they were really hot until GoPro came along and put them out of business. But this this little camera does not record very good audio, and that should be obvious. You're not going to get good audio out of this. I mean, the microphone is this little teeny thing right here on the front. So, and I knew that going into it when I made that video, but the point was, it's a Home Depot guitar, and you got to take it at that. And but the audio quality was super hideous. Now, I'm pretty confident that if I had recorded that with the higher end audio recording equipment that I do have, it would have sounded awesome, and people would have been, wow, that's, if I had taken time to fully tune and intonate that guitar before recording it, and then set up everything correctly, it would have sounded just great. But after I made that video, I got to thinking, audio samples are a fraud. And I know that's kind of a strong statement to make, but when you're recording audio and then posting it up on the internet, there are so many variables. First of all, you've got the guitar itself, your playing style, your signal chain, your amplifier, the recording equipment, the algorithm of the software that compresses the audio before it's uploaded to the internet, your Wi-Fi signal, your router signal, downloading all that stuff into your phone or your tablet or your desktop computer, the quality of your speakers, the room you're sitting in, all those things play a part in what the audio is going to sound like. And I've noticed a lot of folks will mention that they and this is typical with pickup customers who buy pickups from major manufacturers will say, well, I agonized over all these different audio samples and decided to pick this one, but then when I put it on my guitar, it sounded totally different. Well, duh, it's going to. It's just not going to be the same. Now the thing is, another issue that I have with recording audio samples is, and this is an example, I could take that audio of that Home Depot caster that I made. I can run it through software and tune it and totally change the tone and make it sound absolutely amazing. Because I know I can do that, I have to wonder, who else is doing that? So my policy has been, if you're going to buy one of my guitars, you've got 2 weeks to play it. And if you just don't think it's going to work for you, you can send it back to me. And as long as it gets back to me in the same condition that I sent it to you in, you'll get your money back. Minus, of course, shipping charges, but that's part of the cost of how business is being done on the internet anymore. But most knowledgeable, experienced guitar players know that if the tone isn't exactly what they want, they can change that. You can put in different pickups. You could leave the pickups in there and switch the magnets in the pickups. You can change the electronics. You can replace the pots with a different value. You can replace the capacitor. You can do all sorts of things that can have a monumental effect on the tone of that one particular instrument. And I think most of the people who buy my guitars know that and understand it. Recently, I did sell a guitar to a guy. He bought one of my 7-string multi-scales, and when he got it, he said, great guitar and everything, but I want different tone from this guitar. But he knew it was the pickups that needed to be changed. It wasn't the guitar itself. There's, you can't change the wood or any of that and change the tone, but he knew that the pickups could be reconfigured, rewound to produce different tone. So he sent those pickups back to me, and I rewound them, made them hotter, charged up the magnets and sent them back, and that's what he used in the guitar. And so he knew that that's how he could improve the tone and make it and tailor it more to his liking. So that's the reason why right now I'm not really big on recording audio samples, because there's just I just know that there are a lot of samples that are out there that are not going straight from the amplifier into the computer and right up to the internet and to you. They're going through a lot of other stuff to make them sound as nice as it can possibly be before you hear it. And I just think that a smart, intelligent buyer should know better than to trust those audio samples. Well, that's all I've got for this episode of From the Luthiers Workbench. Keep in mind, I'm going to be trying to post my quick tips videos midweek every week, and we'll see how that goes. I know you guys really like the tips, so I'm going to be trying to put those up there. And they're shorter videos, so usually just one tip or one collection of related tips. So keep an eye out for that, and we will see you soon.